Greetings, my dear friends. It's great to see you. In case this is our first introduction, I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an appreciator of big brain activities in general. On this channel, I perform dramatic story readings, I provide role-playing game and movie reviews, and I get to talk to interesting people. Now, on this episode, we're going to be doing a role-playing game review and take a look at the classic adventure module, U1, The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh. And I guess with the subtitle, Premier Adventure from the United Kingdom, published in 1981 for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 1st edition, this 32-page module is for an introductory or low-level adventure and is compatible with any old-school game system with minimal fuss. Set in Greyhawk, this module generally gets glowing reviews as a fun intro adventure. The Scooby Doo module, it's called. It starts in a supposedly haunted house, mysteries unravel, and hijinks ensue. White Dwarf magazine scored it 9 out of 10 when it came out. It's ranked 27th greatest D&D adventure of all time in the 2004 Dungeon Magazine rankings. Every YouTube review I've seen says it's hunky-dory. Now let's see how it sells itself. Desolate and abandoned, the evil alchemist mansion stands alone on the hill, looking out towards the sea. Mysterious lights and ghostly hauntings have kept away the people of Saltmarsh, despite rumors of a fabulous forgotten treasure. What is its sinister secret? Looking at the credits, the listed designer is Dave J. Brown. But looking at this credits block, this thing was probably incestuously made. You've got the developer credited as a playtester, but you also have him listed on the front cover as a co-writer. And oh, what's this? The White Dwarf reviewer is also a credited playtester, meaning he gave a near-perfect score to a module he's credited in. Did I mention conflicts of interest? Back to Dave Brown. I couldn't find much on Brown since the Saltmarsh series and Beyond the Crystal Cave are his only RPG credits. I couldn't find a picture of him or if he's alive or dead. This is the shortest credit write-up of a module designer I've done. On the other hand, developer Don Turnbull was also the managing director of TSR UK, which makes sense that their head honcho would be the one to oversee their first module. Before TSR UK, Turnbull was quite the active hobbyist. From 1969 to 1975, he published 50 issues of award-winning Albion magazine, a gaming zine dedicated to the nerve-wracking game of backstabbing and conquest diplomacy. If you're hardcore into diplomacy, people shouldn't trust you, they should fear you. Apparently, Turnbull was so dedicated to diplomacy that he received a posthumous Lifetime Achievement Award for founding the British play-by-post system for it. He worked on other zines, but more importantly went on to help found White Dwarf magazine in 1977 with Games Workshop. Yes, the same Games Workshop whose games center around your ability to be good at them being directly tied to how much money you give them, and who recently decided they hate their core audience, just like Wizards of the Coast did. But back in the day, White Dwarf was not a house organ for Warhammer. It was a broad-spectrum gaming magazine that was quite influential. Because of his work on White Dwarf, Gary Gygax hired him to run TSR operations in the UK. While Turnbull's personal credits list isn't long, it includes all 3 modules in the U series and the Fiend Folio. While generally regarded as weird by American audiences, you can thank Turnbull for bringing hallmark races like the Githyanki, the Flumph, the Princes of Elemental Evil, and the Slod to D&D. Then we get a mess of editors and production crew intermingled, and I ain't gonna put you through the life story of 4 British people, and frankly it's probably not a good sign to have 4 editors doing double duty. Why is that? Because it probably means the chances for solid continuity get tossed down a shaft. Good rule of thumb, the more writers you see credited in a movie, the more likely the script is gonna suck. Why? Because the story was made by committee instead of 1 or 2 people with a strong vision of what it should be. The story that gets told is going to inevitably get watered down and weakened from what 1 or 2 very motivated people could do. Designed by a committee is a death sentence for creative endeavors. But I will briefly talk about one of them who also gets the cartography credit, a chap by the name Graham Morris. No, it's not Grimy. Somehow to English people this looks like Graham. This guy did rack up more writing credits than the others, several for American TSR, meaning he didn't have to rely on friends to get himself published. These adventures are almost universally well regarded, with some real creative gems in here, like Where Chaos Reigns, which is quite possibly where Star Trek's Borg got ripped off from, and Drums on Fire Mountain, where you get to fight Polynesian orcs and noteworthy elemental creatures. Morris simultaneously can claim credit for the module some people consider the best ever made, Night's Dark Terror, right next to the worst ever made, Up the Garden Path. Speaking of lackluster, his job as cartographer left something to be desired. The maps in the first half of the adventure are missing scale, as in what distance does each block represent? Are they 5 feet? Are they 10 feet? What are they? That's a basic screw-up that shouldn't happen. especially considering he got it right in the maps for the second half of the adventure. For art, we get several artists who mostly match in tone, but some pieces are boring to the point of useless, and some are amazing. One artist I want to highlight is Jim Holloway. This guy's illustration credits go on, and once you learn his style, it's almost impossible to miss his work. He skirts the edges of cartoony illustrations by giving them substance. He did memorable work on some of my favorite RPG products. His art set the tone for West End Games' cult classic RPG, Paranoia. There is a Facebook group dedicated to preserving his work, and it is a very active group. And this was his first TSR module credit, best I can tell. And now let's get into a review of the module. It stinks. So your first spoiler warning is, I hate it. I don't see why the module gets the love it does, including a 5th edition re-release and accompanying fanfare. I don't hate it for the concept of the adventure, because a fake haunted house being a front for a smuggling organization is pretty good. That's not bad. It's the writing, editing, design, and some art choices that really stink up the joint for me. But with all the reviews I had seen of it saying it was so amazing, the adventure module I read did not match up to the hype that I had heard, and that disappointment has led to me despising it. Over the course of this review, you're going to hear me whine a lot about paying for the privilege to do more work, which is what I had to do to make this into something interesting, something I would want to run, because I left behind a lot of poorly worded text and logic gaps. One thing I don't hate is you liking and subscribing, and y'all leave interesting and thought-provoking comments, and sometimes counterpoints to give a different perspective on an issue that I've touched on. At the end of this review, do let me know if yes, we should collect all the copies of this thing and burn them, or if me being let down from the hype unduly colored my opinion. So let's get into this thing. We don't get an index, so we're off to a bad start. The credits are at the back, which is fine, but so is the plot summary. That's some stupid editing to put the plot summary at the end of the module when the DM doesn't need it, instead of at the beginning when it would have helped the guy. Plot summaries are important so the DM knows what's going on and how what they read fits into the bigger picture. Brown and Turnbull decided that was a bad idea, which itself was a bad idea. Another way not having an index sucks is that the module is set up as 2 adventures in one that can be played one after the other, or as 2 completely independent adventures. They had to write that flexibility in because of bad design choices on their part, which we'll talk about later. This review won't be as much of a complete walkthrough room by room as some of the other module reviews that I've done, because so much of this module is filled with padding, extra word count, and boring parts. For both our sake, I'm going to zoom in on the parts that are interesting and then summarize the less interesting parts. But we are going to take a look at the whole thing. Starting at the beginning, we get a preface that's a complete waste of space. It has very little worth talking about, exactly nothing that you need to know, and comes across to me as though John Turnbull loved to hear himself talk. It's 5 paragraphs of nothing, and over the course of those 5 paragraphs, Turnbull decides to take some strange linguistic jabs at American dialect by highlighting how the English might approach wording different than Americans are, and that we're wrong for thinking that it's weird. But over the course of reading the module, I didn't see where this came up. He picked a fight that was completely unnecessary for the text that he gave us. Going over to the second half of the first page, we get the introduction, which is 6 paragraphs long, but really could have been condensed down to 3. In the very first part of the introduction, we're told that the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh is the first module in a 3-part series. It is itself divided into 2 separate adventures, the Haunted House and Sea Ghost, each of which is, in likely playing time, relatively short. And no, they're not relatively short. There's way too many areas to cover for this to be considered short. And this introduction doesn't actually do a good job of introducing you to the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh. It spends most of its time talking about how you 2, Danger at Dunwater, and you 3, the final enemy, are going to play into this. So this was a waste of space. And then take a look down here. Look at this poor layout. You've got text cutting into your art. Why? This is where their excessive wordiness got in the way of proper layout. They went on way too long talking about nothing at all, and it chops into some pretty decent art. And it says down here, for the information of the Dungeon Master only, a summary of the plot of this module is given in the appendix. Why? Why are you hiding a plot summary from the guy who bought and is going to run this adventure? Who are you protecting this information from? Moving on to the next page where we get the town of Saltmarsh, we get a surprisingly little amount of information about the town of Saltmarsh. Despite the opening line saying the little town of Saltmarsh plays a pivotal role in all 4 adventures, the 2 presented here and those presented in U2 and U3, we don't get any shops, we don't get a map, we don't get the names of key characters in the town, but we are told there is a web of intrigue in the town, woven long before the adventure begins, which will only become apparent to the players as the series develops. Indeed, if the players are particularly obtuse, they may not be aware of this at all until too late. Therefore, if there is to be an adequate background to the series, the DM is recommended to prepare the town quite thoroughly, using the guidelines presented in this module as the basis for that preparation. And then it gives us a bunch of writing prompts and pretty much nothing to work with. So okay, we get an adventure called The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh. We get very little information about the town of Saltmarsh itself and told that, hey, congratulations DM, now you have to make up this town out of whole cloth, and bear in mind there's a whole bunch of intrigue that's going to play into modules that haven't been published yet. Have at it. What? The only useful paragraph out of 4 is this one right here. That comes at the end of the section. Indeed, this is the only paragraph we needed. The rest of this section was useless other than giving the DM a homework assignment. Then we get the legend of the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh. And frankly, all 5 of these paragraphs could have been the first one alone, and the rest of it we could have skipped, because this one paragraph sounds pretty fine to me. 4 miles east of Saltmarsh, just inland of the old coast road, looking out to sea, stands the haunted house. Until 20 years ago, it had been the residence of an aged alchemist/magician of sinister reputation, and even then had been shunned by reason of its owner's mysterious occupations. Now, 2 decades after the sudden and unexplained disappearance of its occupant, the house has acquired an even greater air of evil and mystery with the passing years. And then we get some blah blah, some more blah blah, wall of text effect where it's hard to pick out any particularly useful detail because there's so much text in such a small space. And then towards the end we get this stupid NPC that pretty much is going to be a waste of time for your players, a source of frustration if they actually engage with him, and he's not going to give them much worthwhile. So that's kind of cutesy, but it's kind of annoying too. Then in the general notes section, we get a whole page when we really only needed this 1 paragraph. And indeed, the first 4 pages could have been 7 paragraphs in total. 4 pages versus 7 paragraphs. That's how wordy these people are, how much they drag out everything else we're going to get here. If you don't believe me how useless this stuff is, go ahead and inflict it on yourself. I'm not going to waste your time or mine by reading it here, but believe me, I'm doing us a favor. That one useful paragraph was, the secret of the haunted house is that the house is not in fact haunted, but is a shore base for a band of smugglers whose leader is an illusionist of the 4th experience level. The eerie lights seen at night by residents of Saltmarsh are the smugglers' signals to a ship out at sea. The unearthly shrieks and other sounds are caused by magic mouth spells appropriately placed within the building. This is why, in recent times, the house's reputation for evil has increased. The smugglers, in about 3 years of successful operations, have by these means completely frightened away all local investigation, official and unofficial. It is paramount that the players are given no obvious clues that would lead them to believe the house is not haunted. They must deduce the truth for themselves or simply stumble upon it. They might even wander around the house, finding a little treasure but never discovering what actually takes place there. So wait a second, I thought that we were having to send the plot summary to the back so as to keep it only for the DM and not for any other prying eyes that might have bought and wanted to read the book. But here we have a plot summary, so they're not even consistent in their screw-ups. They say the plot summary's at the back, but then they give a plot summary up at the front. And their highbrow, highfalutin shenanigans continues in the next paragraph. This module and the other 2 in the series are designed for thinking players. Those who tackle the adventures imaginatively and thoughtfully will not only obtain good rewards for their characters, but will derive the satisfaction of seeing the various layers of the plot peel away as the real meaning of each clue is discovered. Bullshit. This is bullshit. There's one door that leads into the mystery of the haunted house, and there's one way to get onto the second adventure's playing area. There's not any creativity you can apply in getting to where the adventure is at here. And when you get there, there's not really any creativity you can exercise in how you resolve it. You just have to beat people up until they either surrender or you've killed them all. But apparently they had read Tomb of Horrors and thought, we want to write a Thinking Man's module. We'll say ours is a Thinking Man modules too. It's not. It's a basic dungeon crawl at land and at sea. And then they go on blah, 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 blah for the rest of this page. Believe me, you're not missing a thing by me skipping it. Okay, well, there's actually 2 paragraphs that are all right, that go into the 7 paragraphs I was talking about the moving parts of the adventure. One paragraph talks about how the NPC shouldn't be assumed to just stand in place waiting for the party to happen upon them, but uses way too many words to get that across. And another paragraph that was okay talks about if the party should leave the house before completing the adventure and then seeking to return at a later time, and giving guidance on how to handle that. Because if the smugglers think that they've been found out, they're going to avoid the place for a while until interest dies down. And if they don't think they've been discovered, they're going to continue on as normal. So in these first 4 pages, the authors are trying to set up guidance for an introductory module for a new DM, like Gary Gygax did in B2 Keep on the Borderlands, but the sheer amount of text presented is likely to make a newbie think all of it's important, when barely any of it is. It's not even good advice for a new DM. It is a lot of British people talking just for the sake of them getting a chance to talk. Proving this is not a good introductory adventure for a DM to run. Moving on to part 1, the haunted house, we don't even get a block of flavor text telling DMs this is what you should tell the party the house looks like. Instead, we get some notes that you can extrapolate from, but they're a bit technical and lack much flavor. So if you're going to make the party's first sighting of the house eventful, you've got to figure out how to do it yourself. And we get this odd preamble. It is suggested that the Dungeon Master should introduce the players to the adventure in the following way, and then lists a timeline that you should try to railroad your party down in order to get them to the adventure. First, it says have the party meet at Saltmarsh as a result of vague rumors that there is worthy work for adventurers in the neighborhood. Then it says describe the town. You know, the town that they didn't describe for us? Provide the players with maps and other information you have prepared and that they didn't make. Have them lodge at an inn, but do not let them hear of the haunted house yet. Why? Why not? Let them stay in town, vainly pursuing information and spending their money, according to the list of expenses you have prepared. What? For a day or two before you arrange for them to hear the legend of the house, perhaps in casual conversation with the landlord of the inn, with whom they should by then have struck up an affable relationship. What is this bullshit? Tell them the legend, perhaps let that annoying NPC talk to them if you feel this is appropriate. Once they have decided to visit the house, well, what if they don't? Have the innkeeper introduce them to a prominent member of the town council, so that this august body will be aware of the imminent attempt to stamp out the local menace. The council will not in any way sponsor the quest at this stage, though there will be hints of rewards if the party accomplishes the task. Note, at this time, one of the leading personalities of Saltmarsh, who we don't know because they didn't tell us who that was, who is secretly a receiver for the smugglers, will learn the party's intent from a casual remark in conversation with a council member, and the assassin will be hurriedly planted. Well, what if the party doesn't tell anybody that they're interested in going to do this? How is this NPC going to know and send the assassin out? Are they psychic like that Swamp Ranger in Thief's Challenge, which was equally bullshit? This is a pretty ham-fisted timeline that they came up with that solves a problem that we don't have. If it's an introductory adventure, you start the party in front of the mansion and tell them the adventure's in there, here's some flavor text. You're done. All this stage management, completely unnecessary, but it eats up space. Space they could have given us a description of the town of Saltmarsh, maybe a map to go with it. So what do we get on the house? This text right here. The haunted house stands on the cliff tops, 70 feet above sea level and about 80 feet from the cliff edge. The 6-foot-high stone wall surrounding the garden has partially collapsed in a number of places, so access to any part of the garden is simple, even if the main gate on the cliff road is ignored. This gate, of a heavy and ornate metal construction, is still functional and stands open. The garden itself is overgrown and shows no sign of any care for years. However, any part of the garden in the main earth driveway can be easily traversed. That's it. That's what we get to work with for presenting this spooky haunted house to our party. There is a well to the east of the rear of the house. It's 5 feet in diameter, 15 feet deep, with 3 feet of water at the bottom and a rocky floor. If players go fishing around in there, a poisonous snake will try to bite them because it lives in a hole in the well side about 2 feet above the floor and will attack anyone who reaches the water level. Characters bitten must save versus poison, adding +3 bonus to the saving throw, or be infected with a mild disease from the poison, causing the victim to feel progressively more drowsy, and after 2 to 8 turns fall into a deep sleep for 4 to 16 turns. And that's something I do kind of dig that they did in a introductory module. There's plenty of enemies that do poison damage. However, it's not the instant kill kind of poison. It's kind of poisonous that makes you weak, it makes you drowsy, it does other things, and you could pick up some diseases along the way, but they're only going to kill you if you leave them untreated after you start getting signs of how bad things are. So there's a little bit of kid gloving the encounters. I'm okay with that. That's fine. And then we get a whole bunch of descriptions of the inside of the house, even though we're not in there yet, as well as descriptions of the passages and the cavern complex beneath it, even though that gets its own section and we don't need that information yet. So again, the editing's not great. Why don't we have the underground details go in the underground section? Why don't we have the house interior details show up once we get inside the house? Why don't we get more details about the exterior of the house and the garden? Now there are wandering monsters, though not in the garden, they're all inside the house. And that random encounter table, well, that's kind of some strange choices for a haunted house, because we get 4 goblins. Okay, well, goblins are creepy, maybe, why not? 2 giant rats, alright, well, it's a low-level adventure, giant rats is a thing. 1 giant weasel. Oh my god, look at what this thing can do. Has an AC of 6, hit point of 20, can do 2 to 12 damage plus blood drain. Where after it successfully bites a victim, it doesn't let go, but instead automatically sucks out blood at the rate of 2 to 12 hit points of damage per round. In a low-level adventure, this thing will kill party members, and when I played through it for 5th edition, it almost did wreck shop this 1 giant weasel. And its pelt is actually the most valuable thing you can get in this entire adventure. It's worth 2,000 gold. Nothing else that you get is going to be worth 2,000 gold. And then you get some giant ants. So these aren't thematically great for a haunted house. Now they're okay for an abandoned house, which is what it in fact is. But a little disappointed there. And since we had nothing really to work with on the exterior of the house, let's go into the house. Entrance hall. The front door opens onto a musty, dirty entrance hall. To your left, a corridor leads into the west wing of the house. On either side of the corridor opening, the walls are bare, but some pieces of wood in the corner near the window indicate that a small wooden table or chair once stood there. Who cares? Ahead of you, another corridor leads towards the rear of the house. To your right, a staircase climbs to the next story, reaching it at a balcony which overlooks the hall along its north and west sides. The stairs appear safe to climb. Why would you tell your players that? Though the balcony rail is broken in several places. That's not handy capable. Under the stairs at the rear of the hall, a third corridor leads east. So that's some boring introductory text for a haunted house. Yeah. And why in the flavor text would you tell folks, you see it and it looks rickety, but don't worry, it'll be safe. You can go up it. Just go ahead and build the tension and then instantly dissolve it. And that's not the only place where they nerf the threat of the stairs giving way, because we get another flavor text box saying, the stairs creak ominously as you ascend, but they are safe enough. Why tell your party this? I don't get it. Then in the DM's notes, we get this weird tracking mechanism. So long as it is done before the party move into the hall proper, a careful examination of the floor by a ranger, 10% chance of success per level, so pretty much nothing for the character levels envisioned, or a member of another character class, 5% chance of success irrespective of the level, so again, virtually no chance of it working, will reveal 2 paths along which there has been occasional and recent human movement. One from the foot of the stairs to the corridor towards the kitchen, the other from the foot of the stairs to the western corridor. These have been made by the smugglers when moving between the cellar and their signaling point in room 14. Should the tracks be discovered here and followed in any of the 3 directions, a ranger will have a 50% chance per turn of losing the track, while members of other character classes who were fortunate enough to find an initial track in the hall will be unable to follow it more than a few yards. Why? What's the point of covering this up? The character's already made an incredibly hard roll, and then you immediately take it away from him? What's the point? I thought this was an investigation, a mystery. And you solve mysteries with clues. This looks like clues. Why would you do this? Moving on to the library in room 2, you can tell that this room was once a library with bookshelves around the walls. Most of the bookshelves are broken now and in many places have come away from the wall altogether. Those few shelves still intact are empty, but there is a pile of books in the southwest corner. So you've got a room full of empty bookshelves. And you don't put books on any of them. Instead, you put them on the floor in a corner. You're wasting the room. You could have just put those in the entry hall on the floor in a corner. And this is the only interesting thing in the room. So this was a wasted room. Now the pile of books itself, covered with cobwebs, vermin droppings, and harmless mold, have all been partially spoiled by damp, mold, and mice, but are still legible. Well, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If they've been ruined, why are they still legible? And why are you telling us about it when only 3 are of any interest? Now, those 3 sound like they could be really interesting. 2 of them are written by the mage Tensor, a named character from Greyhawk history, played by Ernie Gygax. One of them, the magical properties of gemstones. Well, that sounds interesting. The other, the magical properties of herbs and flowers. Okay, this sounds useful in-game. And then the mage Nistel, another named character, has a volume called The Metaphysics of Mathematics. And these 3 books can be sold for 150 gold each. That's pretty good, though not in Saltmarsh. You'll have to go to a larger community to find a purchaser. That's not so helpful. If the players want their characters to read the books and demand to know something of their contents, the Dungeon Master's imagination may be stretched. Well, not like the writers could bother to put anything interesting in here. Oh, and checking this section of the Dungeon Master guys might be helpful. So again, look to someone else for answers. However, reading the books will convey no special advantage to the characters, and most of their contents will be too obscure for comprehension. Like, a wizard character couldn't find any of this useful. There's no spells or potion recipes they can get out of it. They can't get XP from reading this stuff. This seems like an enormous wasted opportunity. Inside the third volume can be found a sheet of parchment, obviously torn from a larger sheet, on which are a few lines of handwritten text in the common tongue. It has been spoiled by damp so that only 2 words are still legible: beyond skeletons. Wow, beyond skeletons. What a stupid hint. Now, this is supposed to be a clue to be on guard about an encounter that can come later in the adventure, but this clue would help no one. It's stupid. So when I ran it, I expanded on that to make it a little more descriptive, to give a hope of anybody getting an idea that there might be skeletons in the basement. Now, in the study, it's not an interesting room, but there is something interesting in here. There's a central drawer and a writing desk, and a careful search of the cavity in which the central drawer fits will reveal a small secret compartment. Now, if you find and get into that secret compartment, wrapped in a cloth is a glass vial containing a potion of neutralized poison with 2 doses. So players had to go through 2 separate searches to find this one potion. They had to look in the drawer, take the drawer out, look in the void where the drawer would have been, then they would find another secret compartment, and then look in that to find a neutralized poison potion. That's a lot of work for not a lot of reward, and how many folks are going to think to do that? It's a bit of a dick move. And in Living Area 1, we get our first haunted part of the haunted house because there's a magic mouse spell placed so as to be triggered by anyone coming within 5 feet of a trap door that's in there. A voice coming from the ceiling above will say, "Welcome, fools! Welcome to your deaths!" followed by a prolonged burst of insane and fiendish laughter. Then we get a bunch of rooms with nothing in them, so that's a waste of time. Now, on the first floor, there is a room where there's a large spider living inside a chimney, so if you go searching around in there for treasure, it's going to pop out and attack you. And again, its bite does do poison, but it doesn't kill characters. It just gives them the effects of the enfeeblement spell for 1 to 4 days, which is far more forgiving. And the scullery at the back of the house, there is also a magic mouse spell over there to try to spook folks. So that's it. That's our 2 haunted parts. So if you go in the back of the house, you're going to get yelled at, but if you go in the front of the house or one of the sides, you're going to be okay. That seems kind of inconsistent to me. But those 2 spots do protect ways to get down into where the smugglers are doing their business in the dungeons below. So that makes some sense. And that's pretty much it for the bottom floor. You didn't hear me say a whole bunch of interesting stuff because there's not much interesting stuff. Moving to the upper part of the house, we get a bunch of not much else up here. Oh wait, I take that back. If you go into room 11 and you open up this cupboard and you see this cloak sitting there, well, it looks harmless, but the inner folds are covered with yellow mold. And if you move the cloak, then it releases its poison spores, which will kill anybody in this edition. So while poison had gotten nerfed from the animals, yellow mold will kill you right off the bat, and they just have it sitting there in a spot where characters are likely to poke around a little bit. That's kind of mean. Now, one of the bedrooms holds a spot where the smugglers who work below come up to signal their partners out at sea. However, there's virtually no way the players are going to find that out, and the likelihood that they would even search specific enough to get the clues to find out this is the room and this is the windowsill that the smugglers use is kind of beyond belief. So they're not helping you out very much here. And frankly, why would someone go and closely examine the windowsill of this one room? I don't know any party that would unless they had out-of-character knowledge to do so. And there's nothing in the adventure that would lead them to think this is what they should do. Now, there's a trap in this room from weakened floorboards that they could fall through, but other than that, there's not really any reason for them to come in here. And indeed, that's the case with most of the rooms upstairs. There's not much reason for anybody to come in here. And since there's so little of interest in the other rooms of the house, quite why the party would go into room 15, the bedroom, and find the assassin that nameless conspirator in town told to get out here to foil these people. I just don't know why this encounter would happen. And why would it happen up here on the second floor, further away from the entrances to the underground that he's trying to keep them away from? Why would the players even come up here? I don't know. But if they come up here to one of these far rooms, then they'll find this guy named Ned lying bound and gagged in a corner, clad only in his undergarments. And while the authors use way too many words to talk this through, Ned has been planted here. His cover story is that he's a thief from Seaton who entered the house under cover of darkness the previous night to find a place to sleep during his journey to Saltmarsh, where, he had heard, there was possible work for adventurers. He claims to be a thief, although by class he's an assassin. He entered through the back door and had only reached the kitchen when he was attacked from behind, overcome and knocked unconscious. He awoke some hours ago, bound, gagged, and stripped of his possessions in this room. He did not see his attackers, nor until the party came along, had heard any sounds in the house. Now he would like to be released and to join the party in their adventure. Now Ned's job here is to get the characters out of the house, to stop them from investigating. And if they get too far in, to assassinate them. Now you might ask, how's a naked guy going to do that? Well, he has a hidden dagger that only he's going to be able to find up the chimney in the room. The other players aren't going to be able to find it. And he'll somehow keep that concealed on his person despite being virtually naked. So when the time comes to assassinate him, he'll have his lucky dagger. Now, I can't imagine players would see this guy bound here and think that, oh, he's okay. He must be an innocent person put here by bad people. And my players were skeptical too, just like they should be. But they let him up, he got a dagger, and he followed him along. Now it does say that an alert party may realize that Ned is not what he appears to be. For example, he can't speak thieves' cant, but he does have a cover, saying that a blow to his head has temporarily destroyed his memory of that language. And it cautions the DM to play Ned carefully, to not give away the game quickly, to not make the party dislike and distrust Ned too fast, which is some good role-playing advice. However, we get half a page going over what could have been one paragraph of direction and advice to the Dungeon Master. And then we get more rooms that have virtually nothing in them, more that has virtually nothing in them. And then in the attic, where we don't get a map at all, if players decide to somehow get around the broken staircase that leads up into the attic, they do get some flavor text of grimy cobwebs on the walls and ceiling, and the floor liberally strewn with dust and rubbish. Several holes in the roof allow dim light to enter this large, dirty room, which appears to extend from the back to the front of the house. There are pieces of broken furniture here and there, and rubbish is heaped about the floor. There are 2 large sacks in the northwest corner. Otherwise, there appears to be nothing of interest here. So if players investigate those sacks, they find they contain old clothing or rags and nothing of interest or value in this area. That line is in virtually half the rooms that you're going to see in the haunted house. There's not much going on. It's boring as crap. And so after that flavor text, if the players decide to go to a different part of the attic, they unlock other flavor text that they didn't get before. And why would they have thought to go over there unless they had some indicator that there was something interesting over there? I don't understand who thought this through. As you approach the southern part of the attic, you can see that it appears to extend over the whole of the front portion of the house. It is a storage room where the bric-a-brac of many years has been left. There are more broken pieces of furniture, a few sacks and piles of old clothes, but in general the room appears to contain nothing of interest. So again, we're told there's nothing of interest twice in one room, but there is in fact something of interest. There's a sturge's nest in the southeast corner, and so if you specifically go into the southeast corner and get attacked by the sturges in their nest up in the rafters, there's actually some decent treasure, and you get a combat encounter out of it. Now, sturges are some of the worst things in the world, and I hate them no matter how high my level is. The fact that they latch on and they just keep sucking the blood out of you. Oh man, it's stuff of nightmares. For such weak creatures, they're nasty little buggers, and so basically I encourage you to use them because they're terrifying and punch way far above their weight. In the sturge's nest can be found an old cracked leather purse containing a ring, which is a ring of protection +1, which would make 2 ring of protections +1 because there's another ring of protection +1. Room number 8, the withdrawing room. 2 stuffed armchairs stand near the fireplace of this room. The covers of both have been torn or cut and the stuffing has been pulled out. However, the wooden frames are still intact. The pieces of a broken table lie on the floor near the north wall. So you get all that flavor text, but there's not going to be a thing of interest in any of those places because only if the characters look in the chimney, about 3 feet above the top of the fireplace, a loose stone can be found and is easily discernible. And in the cavity behind the stone, there's a small metal box. It's locked, but the key is nowhere to be found. And the box contains a ring of protection +1. So again, we have a minor magic item hidden in a place where people are unlikely to look, at a depth into that place people are unlikely to look, both in a hidden spot and then locked with no key. Oh, and they get attacked by a giant spider who happens to be living in that chimney. So now we got 2 rings of protection +1 in the same adventure. That's a little repetitive and unimaginative. Why couldn't it have been one like, say, a ring of water breathing, which they keep talking about the future modules rather than talking about the module they're actually writing? So why not have that so in the future the party could use it? So really the second story is a bust. There is not shit up here besides Ned. And who wanted Ned to be there in the first place? Now, if the party goes down the secret trap door, or if they go down the stairs in the scullery, they will get to the cellar, which leads to the cavern areas. Again, it would have been useful if we had the details about the dimensions and the makeup of these areas that were printed at the front of the book, but not here, where you could actually use them. It's called layout and making what you publish useful to the guy trying to run it. I know it's a crazy thought, it'll never catch on. If you go down the scullery, you go into the wine cellar. This was obviously a wine cellar. Wooden bottle racks, mostly broken, line the north and west walls to a height of 6 feet. There appear to be no intact bottles left in the racks, though there are several with broken necks. Broken bottles cover the floor beneath and near the racks. Against the east wall at the foot of the stairs are 2 large metal storage bins which appear to be empty. In the center of the room lies a human corpse clad in plate mail. A long sword lies by the corpse's right hand and a large shield lies across the legs. Now the corpse is that of a fighting man, dead about 3 weeks. His sword and shield are non-magical, but his armor is plate mail +1. His belt pouch has been cut open and is empty, but there is an emerald worth 250 gold pieces in the hollow heel of his right boot. Why would you look there for that? But plate mail is pretty heavy, so having hollow compartments in your boots seems dangerous for your footing, like something should collapse. I don't know how well thought through this is. His body also carries other normal non-magical items such as a dagger, a backpack containing provisions, and so forth. However, if you go for any of that, the corpse is infested with rock grubs. Fucking rock grubs. Some of the worst, nastiest things in D&D. Why? Because they will kill you, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. But you do have options, and it tells you those options and gives you the stats to the rock grubs. So it's very survivable, and here we get into the risk versus reward aspect of earlier D&D. If you want the fancy plate mail and all that guy's weapons, well, it could be a trap of its own, which that's a little clever. Obviously, the smugglers have found this body, witness the cut purse. Equally obviously, they've decided not to move it, but to leave it here in the hope that its presence will deter further exploration by any inquisitive visitor. Kind of smart on their part. Now moving into Area 21, which you can get through a secret door in the wine cellar or through the trap door in room 4. This is a crucially important area because this is a barracks room for the smugglers, and they're going to have a sentry in this room to keep an ear open to see if anybody's bopping around upstairs, and they might need to cover up their tracks or take him out. However, it's been a long period of easy crime and the sentry's gotten careless, so he won't notice a quiet, cautious intrusion from either area. He cannot, however, fail to notice a noisy entrance, and indeed is certain to hear noisy activity either in the lounge or in the wine cellar, including burning away rock grubs if they attack. Now, how is this guy not going to notice someone coming down one of these areas? Because right next to the entrance to these areas is that magic mouth that's going to make a bunch of noise. It seems like an impossible task. You can't move silently past a screaming magic mouth. It's a magical alarm. It's going to go off. And characters of this low level aren't going to be able to dispel the thing before it goes off. So it seems like they're setting up an impossible situation with the delusion that you could get away with it. It's sloppy writing. So if the smuggler is alerted and he has time to do so, he'll immediately go through the secret door to the cavern area to warn his colleagues. That means the adventurers entering this room might find it empty. And it's at this stage, if Ned is with the party, if they make it down here, he'll attempt to assassinate them in the conviction that the smugglers are about to be discovered. And here's the flavor text we get for it. You have entered a room which is so unlike anything else you have seen in the house that for a moment you pause, somewhat taken aback. The illumination here is good, since several lighted torches are held in shoulder-high brackets around the walls. This was obviously a cellar, but equally obviously it is now used for an entirely different purpose. Your first impression is that it is living quarters for about 10 people. If the smuggler's here, you get a fight. If the smuggler has snuck off, or after he's been defeated in the fight, then you get more details, talking more about the beds, about cutlery, jugs, stools, blah, blah, blah. A bunch of provision talk. This is strange. It says, see the appendix for details of the smuggler guard, number 1 on the roster. So up till this point, it's given us the stats of each of the monsters that you encounter in the rooms where they're found. But down here, now we're told to go to the back, and that's going to keep coming up. So it's kind of inconsistency. I don't dig. Either put the stats of all relevant NPCs in the room that you find them, or put all the stats in a master appendix on a single page at the back. These are acceptable ways to do it. This is an uncomfortable middle ground, and I don't see the value in it. Now, once you've had enough of the black bread and dried beans from the considerable food supply to be found, there are 2 doors in the room that are obvious, and 1 secret one. One of the doors is normal, but one of the doors has a strong wooden bar across it, carried in brackets on the frame and the door itself. A single word has been written in the common tongue in chalk on that door saying, danger. Wonder if that could be a problem. Well, the normal looking door leads to the illusionist. That's the mastermind of the landbound smugglers, some guy by the name of Sanballat. And again, the flavor text is really boring. Now, if you go digging through his stuff, you'll see there's a wooden locker containing clothes and personal effects, nothing of value or a particular interest. I don't need you to tell me that. You can just tell me that it's a wooden locker containing clothing and personal effects. You don't have to tell me if it's boring or not. I'll decide that for myself. Now, there's a separate wooden box under a table that has some stuff in it, most of which is boring, but there are a couple interesting things. The books are a volume of erotic poetry, fully illustrated. I wish my players had found that. A naval almanac listing tides for the area of coast containing Saltmarsh. A total of 100 miles of coastline is covered. That's kind of neat. And a learned volume concerning mesmerism and its effects. Inside this book is a sheet of parchment carrying some simple words and phrases in the common tongue and their equivalents in the Knoll language. Note that unless one of the characters speaks Knoll, it will not be identified as such, but will be some foreign language. Which we didn't need you to tell us that, because if a character doesn't know a language, then they can't read the language. You don't have to give us that instruction. Then you can find Sunbellet's spell book, and under the bed there's a loose flagstone. Detect as concealed portal above a small cavity, inside of which is a small iron box that has a bunch of potions and some platinum in it. It's got a needle on it to serve as a trap, but that's been tipped with blue dye. It's not poisonous, has no harmful effects, but the dye spreads under the skin, forming an obvious blue patch that gives you away as having had sticky fingers. And that's kind of neat. Not all needle traps have to be poisonous. Now, behind that door that said danger, well, there's a reason this place is called the Skeleton's Room. The room is dark. Light from the large room behind you spills faintly to show that the room is only about 12 feet across. But to your left, there is only darkness. What little you can see is dingy and dirty. Beyond the light cast from the barracks room, there are 6 skeletons occupying this room, placed here by the alchemist that used to own the house to guard his private laboratory, which is in a room beyond here. It's been some time since they were aroused, so they'll be a little sluggish to make their initial reaction to intrusion, but they will attack after a short pause. That sounds unduly wordy for saying 1 round after the party enters the room, then the skeletons will attack them. Could have just said that. Now, I said the alchemist lab is beyond this room. Not by any door that you're going to be able to spot. There's a secret door in this room to find the alchemist's hidden laboratory. So we get another concealed way of getting into the more interesting parts of the adventure. Now don't forget, the chances of finding a secret door are pretty low in this game. And we've got them everywhere, guarding the most interesting parts of the adventure. But assuming your players find the secret door and get in it, the secret door opens toward you to reveal, piled on the floor of this room, a clutter of old and broken glass and earthenware. There are 3 small copper pots amidst the debris, and these appear to be intact. There is nothing of value in this debris piled by the north wall of the laboratory. As the party gets a view of the rest of the room, okay, so we didn't need that at all. You could have just kept the flavor text box going. A bench runs down the west wall of what was obviously a laboratory. On the bench are various jars of powders and liquids and several pieces of chemical apparatus, some stained in different colors as the liquids they contained dried up long ago. There is a table against the south wall, forming an L shape with the bench. In the chair before the table sits a human figure with its back to you, apparently studying a book which is open on the table. The figure wears a robe embroidered with a variety of mystic symbols and a pointed hat. On the table is a candlestick, a tiny stump of unlit candle remaining in it, and a variety of other items, which even in the dim light shine with the warmth of pure gold. One of these objects looks like a human skull. So the figure is the skeleton of the alchemist, an original owner of the house, struck dead during his work by a heart attack. Before the alchemist died, he was reading the book which lies open on the table. Its title is Ye Secret of Ye Philosopher's Stone, with no author acknowledged. Now this book is very valuable, and any alchemist will gladly pay 500 gold pieces for it, though again the party would have to leave Saltmarsh and find some bigger town to sell it in. The book itself is too profound and recondite, a work to be understood by anyone other than the appropriate specialist. Even that specialist would have to be very learned, but the party will be able to deduce the general subject matter. Broadly, the book instructs on the making of a philosopher's stone, then describes how that stone can be used to convert base metal into gold. Words like stone, gold, transmuting, and so forth will be recognizable and will recur frequently. The DM must decide how quickly and how accurately the party can deduce the tenor of the book's contents. Again, this sounds like a good opportunity for a wizard to have something neat that they can get out of this book if, say, they make some intelligence checks or whatever. This sounds like an important work. It obviously was. The alchemist was using it for something, but we lose that opportunity in this module. They don't think to include any neat details like that. And those objects are in fact successful experiments of turning base things into gold. So that human skull, it's worth 750 gold pieces because it's solid gold, baby. There's an apple, a rose, some small discs. And in a secret drawer in the table that's locked in a secret room that you can only get to by going through 2 secret doors. There is the alchemist's spell book, because it's not secret enough, it's not secure enough for him to be in his secret lab behind 2 secret doors to where he could just have his spell book sitting out. What the hell? There's some other loose valuables in the room, but the thing that the guy's holding in his hand, well, the party might assume it's the Philosopher's Stone, but it's in fact a cursed luck stone, which really sucks. Because once you get your hand on it, you're never getting rid of it. Even if you throw it away, it'll show right back up on you. And it gives you a -1 to pretty much everything until you get a remove curse done and get the hell away from it. It's a pretty shitty magic item, but I do admire its chutzpah. So going back out into the barracks room, I mentioned there was a secret door in here. Well, that happens to be the only way into the rest of the adventure, into the pirate caves and finding enough information out to move on to the second part of the module. But again, if all the party misses their secret door rolls, you're screwed. No secret door for you, no rest of the adventure for you. That's good design right there. But if you do happen to find that secret door and go through it, you find passages and caverns that all decline perceptibly towards the sea. This area is full of smugglers, their cargo, gnolls, Sunballet the illusionist, a green slime that will just wreck your party members and turn them into a green slime in 1 to 4 melee rounds. No resurrection possible unless you quickly scrape it off, excise it, burn or freeze it. So they didn't nerf that either. So yellow mold and green slime still just as lethal as always, but animal poison, you get a break. And these rooms aren't particularly interesting beyond what I said was in them, and we can skip that. But again, it would have been helpful to have the guidance on the dimensions of the caves and the passages that was given at the beginning of the adventure instead of here when we would actually use it. Now we do get this big piece of pretty bitchin' artwork. Not the highest quality, but it's fun. And then we get to room 30, the sea cave, where the smugglers have their little boat where they ferry the smuggled goods back and forth from the land to the pirate ship that comes by to pick up and drop off now and then. And that's the end of part 1. Should the party succeed in wiping out the smuggling ring, a grateful Saltmarsh Town Council will vote them a reward of 500 gold pieces per surviving party member. Should they also succeed in killing or capturing Sunballet the illusionist, the reward will be doubled. Why it'll be doubled? I don't know. Did he have any sort of wanted posters out for his head? Is it the fact that he's an illusionist that makes him more valuable? They didn't even know this ring was here. Why would they be given extra kickers for a ringleader? I don't know. The party will be allowed to keep any treasure they find, but will not get full value from any of the goods they took from the smugglers to resell. They'll be asked politely but firmly to pay 25% excise duty on the value of any contraband that they got, thus retaining only 75% for themselves. 25% sales tax, and no wonder they're smugglers here. And let's think about it, the smugglers weren't actually hurting anybody, they were just engaged in trade and avoiding the taxmen. That's a very American attitude, and by the end of this, I don't know that they're actually the bad guys. I've got the feeling that the town's more the bad guys by making honest trade so cost prohibitive that nobody wants to pay their taxes. Yeah, who is the bad guy here? Yeah, the party will need to rest and recuperate for a while before they can pursue the second part of this module. Again, ensure they pay for their food, accommodation, and other living expenses before they're invited by the town council to the meeting, which starts the next adventure. And so that's it. You get a bunch of empty rooms, some pretty namby-pamby encounters, not much creativity going on, and then pirates in a sea cave. Wait, I think I've heard of that before. Maybe by the end of this review it'll come to me. And then we move on to part 2, the Sea Ghost. Now bear in mind, the only way we get to part 2 is if the characters found the secret door to get them down to the pirates in the caves in part 1. We get a preamble here, kind of like to our Constitution, so this must be important. These 4 or 5 paragraphs could have been condensed down to 1, but no, we got folks who are getting paid by the word, I suppose. A few days after their triumphant return from the destruction of the smuggler's ring at the haunted house, the party is hastily summoned to an emergency meeting of the Saltmarsh Council. The council's figured out that since there was a land-based operation of a smuggling ring that got busted, there must be a sea-going part of the smuggling operation to move that contraband in and out. Because remember, they want their sales tax. And the city father is fearful that any surviving smugglers may seek to reestablish their operation from some other base. They want you to go stop it, and they'll give you quite a bit of a reward to do it. 500 gold piece per member of the party for the successful conclusion of the adventure. And of course they can keep whatever loot they find on the way, subject to 25% sales tax. And the council figures that since the surviving smugglers probably don't know their land-based colleagues have been compromised yet, they still have a chance to find them. To help the party out, they're going to assign 2 local men from a part-time corps of excise officers, IRS field agents. They're assigning you 2 part-time IRS field agents to help track down these smugglers. That's what's going on here. The proposal is therefore that the excise men will undertake a patrol each night, but as soon as an approaching vessel is spotted, the party should perform the actual task of boarding, with the excise men going for added support. Note: if you wish to play in this adventure, read no further. What follows is for the Dungeon Master only. For information of the Dungeon Master only, a summary of the plot of this module is given in the appendix. Why? We're 15 pages in. Who are you protecting these secrets from at this point? And of course, this whole setup assumes that the party even got the information necessary for this to happen. If they got hemmed up in a secret door, any of the number ones which could stop the adventure, they're done. They're not going on. And the writers know about that, and they have a little line in here that they think helps cover their tracks. If for whatever reason the party actually failed to return from the haunted house, it's because they failed to return from the haunted house, not that they went there, found nothing, and came back. This second adventure is suitable for a medium-sized party, 5 to 10 characters, 1 to 3 experience levels each. In other words, run it anyway. I just love that. But the town council also thinks that the best time to keep an eye out for these people is going to be the next dark of the moon, which begins in about 2 weeks. How they came to that conclusion, I don't know. Why they think it would be a good idea to look for a ship out at sea under a dark sky with no moonlight to help find anything is the best approach? I don't know, man. And the special notes about running this adventure, we get a bunch more blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to skip over it except for the parts that piss me off. There's 2 passages in particular in 2 separate paragraphs because this whole thing could have been 1 paragraph to cover just what the enemy tactics would be. We get these gems. On no account is the Dungeon Master to inform the players that the smugglers are running arms to the lizardmen. See the plot in the appendix again, as well as dealing in contraband. They must discover this for themselves as they play through the module, by the presence of the lizard men aboard the ship, by finding the aquatic elf prisoner and knowing what he knows, by deciphering the special chart and letter in the captain's cabin, by finding the secret cache of weapons, and by putting all these clues together to come up with the correct conclusions. So why would a DM just blurt that out? Who are they trying to protect here? Do DMs normally just blurt out the secret plans of their enemies to their players? Is that a thing that we're known to do? But in the very next paragraph, we're told, should all this fail to trigger the correct conclusions, then the Dungeon Master may, at the end of the adventure, be forced to give away the arms running information, if only to ensure that the party is tempted to continue adventuring in modules U2 and U3. The method of revealing this information must be left at the discretion of the DM, who is luckless enough to be dealing with an obtuse bunch of players. Okay, so the paragraph right before this says, don't tell the players what's going on. And then this paragraph says, well, we need you to be able to play U2 and U3, so be sure to just tell the players if you have to. What a thinking man's adventure. And then we get to the signaling system section, and this is ridiculous because look at this chart that's supposed to enable players to figure out what the signaling system is and how to use it to ensnare the shipbound smugglers. And frankly, based on what I read in the module and looking at this, even with DM's knowledge, I don't know that I would come to the conclusion that this module thinks you're supposed to get and be able to effectively do that. So if the players figure it out, there's a system that should be followed that will cause the smugglers to send out somebody from the ship to start loading the vessel with the smuggled contraband. But if the players don't know how to crack this code and work this system, then the people on the ship will just leave and the adventure's over. Congratulations. And the worst thing about this, they're not even hiding the rest of this adventure behind a skill check where the character might be able to figure it out. No, the player has to figure this out. And I'm not familiar with naval signaling techniques. I don't think many players are. Not these days. The wargamers probably, and ex-Navy folks, they probably know, but the rest of us, no, we're clueless. So under the moonless sky, with a system of signaling that you probably don't understand, the tax agents doing their patrols, but fear not, there's still a chance that you'll be able to discover the presence of the ship. For you see, the tax agents on their patrols have an automatic 20% chance per signal from the ship to see the signal. Now, the player characters only have a 15% chance per signal of seeing it if they describe themselves as being particularly attentive to the Dungeon Master. If they're busy doing anything else or being inattentive, they have no chance of seeing it. These seem like really low numbers, and again, I'm not seeing great odds of the player characters getting on that ship. Now, the boarding the seago section isn't actually that bad, but again, how are they even going to find it out at sea to know where they need to row their small boat out to it? It's a moonless night. they can't see anything. And there's a timeline of how long it'll take the characters to get from point A to point B to get to the ship. And if they want to do any fancy maneuvers to try to sneak up around it under cover of dark, then they can do this. And it's not a short amount of time. It could easily go for an hour in the amount of time it takes them to get there. And it talks about a bunch of different tactics the players might do to approach smarter, and that's not bad. But it also points out there's a good chance that the folks on the ship are going to spot them or hear them coming, so that's not good. And then trying to get onto the ship is going to give lots of opportunities to be discovered as well. And if a player character tries to get on the ship, fails and falls into the water, if they're wearing heavy armor, that's not good. That's a one-way trip to Davy Jones' locker. So going in plate mail and trying to shimmy up the side of a ship, not a good idea. Now, features of the smuggler's ship is pretty good. It does a good job of describing the ship, its contents. It's got some thought-through encounters on it. But this doesn't solve the fact that this is a boring ship. There's not much exciting going on here. Things seem pretty routine and normal, so there's not much for me to talk about when we get to the actual room descriptions. Now, this section does address what happens if you use fire as a weapon on a boat, and guess what? It's not a good idea. You could burn the thing down to the waterline. It's a risky move. Now, it does talk about the odds of if the party decides to try to sink the ship instead of take any valuables from it or any prisoners, so it's good that there is that option. It talks about climbing on the rigging, or the chances of doing that. It uses way too many words for it, but it does do it. It talks about fighting on the rigging, which is kind of neat because it adds some tactical depth to what's going on. And in Surrender by the Smugglers, it talks about how if you kill the officers and enough other crewmen, the remaining crewmen might surrender and negotiate, and you can pay them to give you information, although their information isn't the most useful in the world. So you don't have to fight your way through every single man on the ship, but my guess is most parties will do that. Oh, and the lizardmen that are on ship because there are lizardmen on the ship, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me because they're paying for these weapons to be brought to them, so why they would send a contingent of lizardmen who can only raise questions if anybody were to find them doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Now, the rooms in the ship, they're really not that interesting, so I'm not going to talk much about it, except for a few amusing things that stuck out to me, both good and bad. On the poop deck, and I love that name, we get art that shows a moon behind one of the pirates. However, the moon is clearly not supposed to be out when this happens. It's supposed to be a moonless night. So it's good Holloway art, but it doesn't match what we were told is there. And then in this notes section, we get this very detailed timeline of when these NPCs are going to be, where they're at, and where they're going to move to after a certain time. But how would the time period that would place them on the poop deck possibly work out when it takes the party about an hour to get from shore to the ship? They would have already cleared out of this location. What timeline problem are they trying to solve here? I get it that the pirates are supposed to be dynamic thinking people, but is this really helping me to know that after doing all this reading, I realize that they're not at the place they're going to be described as being at by the time the party would be at the place that they're at? Ugh. There's a kitchen with some food in it. There's some stores with some food in it. There's a place with rope and nails. Real exciting stuff. So the lizardmen quarters, that's a little more interesting because obviously it has lizardmen in it, and they're not interested in talking. You're going to have to fight them. Why there has to be a fight? I don't know. Do the lizardmen have a beef with these guys? Are the lizardmen actually trying to sneak by these guys? Lizardmen aren't known for being deep, duplicitous, sleuthing types. Why would they care if the party saw them? These are just more talking monkeys, more than likely coming to see them. Why does there have to be a fight? A companion of one of the lizardmen is a pseudo-dragon, those adorable little buggers, who will fight to defend his lizardman companion, but inexplicably will not confer its magic resistance to him, so he's screwed if there's a magic user in the party. And once Lizardman 1 is dead, there's a 50% chance the pseudo-dragon will decide he wants to be a companion with one of the party members. Well, first off, you faithless whore, how dare you? These people just killed your boy, and now you're saying you want to shack up with them. What is this bullshit? And two, we get a lot of text telling us about how this faithless pseudo-dragon will switch their allegiance to one of the party members that just killed his master, given various factors and preferences of what type of character they'll go for and alignment and blah, blah, blah. Do we really need to know this? Charisma score comes into it, and there's base chances and bonus chances and blah, blah. This is not useful information for us to have. You could put in one or two sentences that the pseudo-dragon is available to be wooed as a companion for one of the party party members, make a charisma roll. There you go, you're done. And there's certain types of characters it will not attach itself to in the story, assuming the party doesn't kill it in the fight, which there's a good chance they will. The magic users' quarters aren't that interesting, but the captain's cabin does have something that amuses me. On his desk, there's several letters of a personal and alarmingly intimate nature from 3 different ladies in 3 different ports, each of whom is under the common misapprehension that she is Miss Sigurd Snake Eyes. That's kind of funny. But there's also a curious semi-literate document requesting a further supply of ironware as per previous consignments and at the agreed terms. This is the ordering agreement, the contract for the lizardmen to buy the arms that they're ordering from the smugglers. And apparently it's written in some sort of special code to make things generic and give plausible deniability and this and that. And my question is, why would anyone care? Why would the lizardmen care? Why would the smugglers care? The weapons are hidden in a secret compartment in one of the officers' quarters. Who would even find them? And if some inspector did find them, they're not going to be given some benefit of the doubt from some loopy contract written with lizardmen who aren't really literate. Why would they bother with the contract? I don't think the writers of this understand how smuggling and the criminal underworld works. You leave as few trails as possible, and yet they're ham-fisting them into the story. Now, there is a chart that indicates the rendezvous point with the lizardmen up the coast, and quite a few electrum pieces that were the first half of payment from the lizardmen for the weapons, which again brings me to the question, why are the lizardmen here? Why aren't the lizardmen who have already made the contract and made the order, why are they escorting these folks with the weapons while carrying the money for the second half of the payment with them instead of back with the rest of their tribe waiting for the order to show up, and then they give them the 1,000 electrum pieces and the deal's done? Because if the lizardmen are here and the smugglers decide to turn rogue on them, guess what? They are going to kill you and you're outnumbered, and they're going to take your money. Because believe it or not, smugglers aren't the most trustworthy people. This is needlessly risky. This is not how I would do it. Not that I have experience with smuggling. The crew's quarters is boring. The cargo hold has some stuff in it, mostly fine wine, brandy, scented soaps, and salt. And each of the casks that contain these things do have money that, when you add it up, is 15,480 gold pieces. But don't forget that 25% excise tax that Saltmarsh is going to take from you if you bring it back and try to sell it there, knocking your haul down to 11,610 gold pieces to the party. And this is why the smugglers are smuggling, because Saltmarsh are a bunch of dicks. Now, in the bosun's cabin, there is a secret door that hides the most interesting thing on the ship. A captive aquatic elf named Oceanus that the party's probably unlikely to find, because what are the chances they're going to be looking for secret doors on a ship? There's only so much room to put anything behind a secret door, so why would they think to do that? Now, the chances that Oceanus is going to try to draw their attention are fairly low, because he only speaks Elven, and it's highly unlikely that the party is going to go around talking in Elven. But there's quite a few things that could put him off. So he's probably not going to be like, hey, come over here, help me out. But if the party happens to look and find him beyond that secret door, he's kind of a cool guy. And the reason he's here is because his tribe of aquatic elves noticed that there was some funny business going on between some people on a ship and the lizardmen that have recently moved into the area. He went to investigate and he got caught. But really, besides this pretty neat art that blissfully uses an appropriate use of shadows to cover up. But I think his inclusion here is aimed at hooking people to come back for U2 and U3, because we can't have a cool adventure on our own. Everything has to lead up to U2 and U3, which sucks when you're in a product that you paid for and they keep talking about how you're going to need to buy these future products. Why can't we just have a good time here? Behind another secret door are the weapons and the bilge. There's a couple gold coins with extra rock grubs that there's pretty much no reason that players should be exposed to. And those are the most interesting things on the ship. The next section talks about treasure from the Sea Ghost. It reminds you of the contraband the party might have found and how much they can expect to get for it. And if they want the ship, they can have the ship as part of the reward of what they did. Now, if they don't want to keep the Sea Ghost, which what player who respects themselves at all would give up having their own ship, your own floating plunk of wood to sail towards the horizon, to distant lands, forgotten kingdoms, to explore at your own will with the wind at your back? And that's one of the reasons I like Spelljammer so much, because not only can you go all around the world, but you can go across the stars to different campaign settings and be a space pirate. Who doesn't want to be a space pirate? If they don't want to keep the ship for themselves, the council will buy the ship from them for 5,000 gold, and surprisingly, there's no sales tax on it. Now, the IRS field agents that went with the party, they'll expect a full share of the treasure collected, but for some reason, they won't try to claim any magic items. Should one of them be slain, his surviving colleague will claim the dead man's share on behalf of their bereaved dependents. And this raises an alignment test that the party may have to face if they resist it and they claim to be good people. I'll give them points for raising that kind of moral consideration in an adventure. Then in conclusion, the authors say, the party will have gained some or all of the following information goes down a list. That smugglers, in addition to smuggling contraband, are running weapons to a colony of lizard men for reasons which are at present obscure. They have a vague idea where the lizard men's colony is, and the fact that this weapon smuggling appears to have been going on for some time. And if they have enough information, the party should be able to deduce that the lizard men are planning either an attack on Saltmarsh or on some other place, location at present unknown. Why can't the lizardmen just be buying weapons? Maybe they want to use these things for hunting. Maybe they want to use these things for self-defense. I'm a Second Amendment advocate. Why do I have to be bothered just because I want to buy a broadsword? What business is it of yours how many morning stars I have? The possibility of such a lizardman attack should provoke the party into warning the Saltmarsh Council. And if they don't, the taxmen definitely will. And this should lead directly to the adventure described in Module U2, Danger at Dunwater, because we're getting those hooks in deep to make you buy that next module. If the party fails to gain enough information, or makes the wrong deductions, or no deductions at all, then the DM must decide where the party should be coaxed towards the U2 adventure. If not, then adventuring in the Saltmarsh area would appear to be at an end. If the DM wishes to coax the party towards module U2 and further adventuring, this must be done craftily without giving the game away too much, because this is a thinking man's module. For a party with too much information, will probably have an unsatisfactory adventure. Rather, the DM must slyly bend the conversation this way and that amongst the players, until at least a vestige of the right train of thought appears. Remember that U1 is a thinking man's module. And then we get to the appendix, the one that's in the back that tells you what the whole plot is, and they kept protecting the whole plot despite giving it away numerous times from people who shouldn't be 15 pages in and still reading the adventure. But the plot is, a gang of smugglers are running contraband, brandy, silk, and such. Are these things illegal? If so, why? Is the issue just they don't want to pay the 25% excise tax? I mean, that's a lot. That is a quarter of the value of the items you're trying to sell that the government wants for nothing. Now, I get it. Maybe the Brits think that that's a perfectly acceptable thing to pay because y'all with y'all's VAT tax, it's at least, 17%, often 20% or above. Y'all are used to paying that kind of thing. On a 2-cent tax stamp, we staged a violent revolution to kick the British out. So to an American, the bad guys here look like the Saltmarsh Town Council, not the smugglers, who weren't hurting anybody. They put up extensive safeguards to keep people away. And it doesn't even say if they're selling this contraband in Saltmarsh. They don't say where any of this crap's actually going. Is this just a stopping point? I don't know. They didn't identify that. But remember, British people out there, you're subjects of the crown, not citizens. And that's why Americans don't pay 25% sales tax. All right, anyway, so a gang of smugglers are running contraband on the ship. Sea goes to a sleepy coastal area from where it can be distributed to a wider market. They chose an old house, reported to be haunted, blah, blah, blah. One of the receivers of the contraband is a prominent merchant in Saltmarsh. And the smugglers are additionally running arms to a colony of lizardmen for reasons which are explained in Module U2. So we don't even get to find out why this is happening. We have to come back for the next episode if we want to know. In Danger at Dunwater. And spoiler for that, the PCs can commit genocide on completely innocent lizardmen. So the agents of Saltmarsh really are the bad people. And blase, they tell you about the aquatic elves and Oceanus getting caught. And so yes, here at the very end, they decided to give us the plot that they've spelled out numerous times over the course of the adventure. Good job, F-. You protected the plot. Then we get into the stats for the human and humanoid NPCs. But remember, the stats for the animal NPCs, the skeletons, and the gnolls are in their sections. They just decided to be a good idea to make sure to break up where they put the stats, so you never really know where you should be looking to get the stats you need to run the encounters you have. Oh, and the two gnolls, see key to Area 30. The stats for the gnolls aren't at Area 30. Their stats are in 27. They couldn't even keep this consistent. This is why I was nervous about all those editors. That means not one person was paying close enough attention. So the stats at the back, they aren't on a single table. So there goes the convenience of putting them in the back for easy reference, because now you got to flip through pages to find the stats that go with each of the keyed encounters that you're supposed to be using them in. They're just less conveniently set up. This layout is atrocious. Also, the NPC stats are separated out by adventure section, so they're not even in a single easy to reference page. They're spread out across sections, across multiple pages, interrupted by Sunbellet's parchment and the signaling system that, even after reading this, I'm not sure I can figure it out, and how would the PCs ever figure this out without having access to this, which is not in the adventure. You remember earlier in the adventure where it said wearing heavy armor at sea is a bad idea? Why is it the captain, the mate, and the bosun are all wearing chainmail armor? That's a heavy armor. So the most important people on the ship, ships that often get tossed in the waves, knocking people over the railing, are wearing heavy armor. So the most important people are also the dumbest people, because they're the most likely to drown on their own ship. What the hell is this? And then we get to the pre-gen character roster, which, okay, that's fine. And this is presented as a single table with their stats on it. Why couldn't we have done that with the NPCs and made it more convenient? Other modules had done it before this. What's this? The starting first level characters begin with a randomly determined magic item. Level 1 pre-gens getting magic items? They don't need magic items to get through this adventure. Why would we give them those? And this map. It shows that the smugglers are moving from the drop-off point at the haunted house to Saltmarsh, but why would they sail to Saltmarsh from here? Where are they smuggling? Where are they smuggling the items from? Are they taking them out of Saltmarsh to here and then on to somewhere else? Are they staging the supplies here and then taking them to Saltmarsh? How are they going to avoid paying the excise tax there? This doesn't make sense. Smugglers try to hide what they do. Why would smugglers go right into port? Why wouldn't they land somewhere else to distribute their goods? To me, it seems like U1 is trying to simulate both the better introductory modules from basic D&D while being as sophisticated as some of the advanced Dungeons and Dragons modules that had come before, but I don't see where it does either one of them very well. It lacks the user friendliness of those more successful introductory modules, and it lacks the depth and replay value of the more sophisticated advanced Dungeons and Dragons modules. Once the Sinister Secret's found out, surprise is gone. And there's not a lot of ways to solve the problems or to approach the problems in this module. The most important part of the haunted house are the caves. There's one way in and one way out of there, and the only thing you can do when you get there is beat everything until it stops moving. And the sea ghost. There's only one way onto it, and once you get there, you have to beat everybody until they stop moving. There's not other ways to solve this problem. So all that thinking man adventure is bullshit. These are simple, straightforward dungeon crawls whose only connection is a nearly impossible leap of logic that players could easily miss. Simple dungeons are fine, but the writers seem to think they had made some amazing thing here, and if they called it a thinking man's module enough, other people would agree, and it's not. For example, Saltmarsh itself. We get a name and rough location for Saltmarsh, and that's it. Modules that came before gave us towns and descriptions to work with, but not here. We get some writing prompts if we want to design it ourselves, and same goes for the town intrigue details of some unnamed person working with the smugglers and against the party. The intrigue details are not enough to work with. Hell, the town isn't enough to work with. With this module, you pay for the privilege to design your own town. I can do that on my own for free. The house isn't very haunted. I get it. That's the conceit of the adventure. But subverting audience expectations is garbage. Surprising the audience with twists and turns and plot developments is great. We love that kind of stuff. But if your cover heavily implies this is going to be a haunted house adventure with vampires and the like, and then you wind up with some derivative pirate bullshit, then no, that's not good. Some of the treasure is hidden behind too many compartments and too many checks that people wouldn't think to do. So that's not good. I counted, there's 12 empty rooms, each of which eats up time and kills momentum, and bore players as the DM again and again has to say, you look in the room and there's nothing of interest or value. If the players do their due diligence and investigate each room in the module, say at a rate of about 5 minutes apiece, you're looking at an hour of wasted time. And that's just the empty rooms with nothing of interest, not the rooms with just one thing that's kind of interesting in it. And the sentries posted on the bunk room How could they not be alerted by the magic mouths right next to the entrances the players have to go through to get down there? And the adventure tells us when they're alerted, they go hide in the caves behind the secret door, and the players may not find that secret door. Some modules run the risk of blocking the party from whole sections of the module or the most interesting parts by locking them behind secret doors, skill checks, or spells that the party had no idea they were supposed to memorize or cast. And this one does bad things in that category. First, it plot convenience playhouses an NPC into the haunted house to do everything he can to convince the party to leave the place, and if they get too close to finding out what's really going on, to murder them to keep them from getting any further. Well, what happens if he convinces them to leave the house, like what happened in my game? Adventure's over. And the module's answer to this is, well, run the second half for another adventuring party. Even they knew this wasn't very well thought through and still couldn't come up with a better answer than that. Run it anyway. And if the party ignores him and gets too close to the truth, he's a third level assassin. This is a module for introductory level characters, so they're probably going to be first level when they go into this. A level 3 assassin going against first level characters. It doesn't sound like good odds. One option you might pursue is to just leave them out altogether. I'm not trying to pull one over on my players because I want them to play through the module that I paid for. And most D&D players that I've gamed with hate it on a personal and visceral level when you have supposedly friendly NPCs betray them. Now, fantasy stories are full of treacherous characters, and games like Vampire thrive off of them. Those players are excited now they have a new grudge they can go against for eternity. But D&D players will hold it against you personally, DM. And then there's a second problem the writers give you. This module has those secret doors that if you don't pass the check, you miss out. Adventure's over, you're done. And there's no workaround identified because there's only one way in and one way out. And before you say, Steven, you handsome devil, please take my BMW. I want you to have it. It is a free gift from my heart to you. Just put in a workaround in the adventure. I shouldn't have to fix a published adventure, not a professional grade one that I paid for. And that pet peeve of having to fix published adventures is actually the first reason I stopped buying anything from Hasbro. Besides later finding out they hate white men, their primary playing base, their incompetent writing and design decisions turned me off even before that. Why do people buy published modules? It's because they want an adventure they can run with less work than if they just made it themselves. This means the buyer doesn't want to have to fill in the gaps left by incompetent writing and design. They want indices and information clearly available to them while they're running the game. And they want a scenario that's more interesting than what they'll come up with just by rolling on a bunch of random charts. There are reasons B2 Keep on the Borderlands is lauded, and B1 In Search of the Unknown is mostly unknown. If you paid money for Keep on the Borderlands, you got a fully stocked adventure you could pick up and run. If you did the same for In Search of the Unknown, you paid to do more work. Not a good value. Also, Keep on the Borderlands gave you a fully detailed town with NPCs you only had to name to work with, unlike the BS that is Saltmarsh. The Pirate Cave is a ripoff of the Pirate Cave in 1977's D&D sample dungeon, often called the Tower of Xenopus, by John Eric Holmes. It's also a theft the authors don't acknowledge, which is tacky. So what I do to fix some of the problems when I ran it? First, I made the haunted house more haunted. I put a magic mouth at every one of the entrances and gave better flavor text. The random encounter table also listed goblins as a possibility, so I decided my Fey goblins would make this a properly haunted house. I vaguely heard that D&D 6th edition decided to go with the Fey goblin route, but I did it way before. And you can get more details on how I use goblinoids like that in my Keep on the Borderlands review. To keep it short, when my goblins get in groups, they can use powers of phantasm and darkness to inspire terror in their targets while they giggle in the corner in Schadenfreude. Now these powers don't do much damage, but they freak your players the heck out when their character senses are suddenly unreliable. Illusion magic should be terrifying, and I make it so. In some rooms that had nothing going on, I put in some goblin effects to make up for it. Like in this room where there's a mushroom circle that doesn't actually do anything. If the party investigates and messes with the mushroom circle, I have one of the goblins start using their phantasm powers on the party. It freaked them the hell out. They thought they were trapped in some alternate dimension, but no, they were just trapped inside their own mind. They only took 1 or 2 points of damage, but now they really want to exterminate goblins. Now the pirates are happy to let the goblins root around upstairs because they keep people away from the house. And the goblins don't bother the pirates because the pirates buy them off with smuggled booze and food that went rancid in their ship's kitchen, which the goblins love. Everybody's happy. Second, I combined rooms that had little or nothing going on in them so as to make exploration go faster. Now, instead of 5 minutes per pointless room, it's 5 minutes per 2 rooms that have at least something going on in them. Third, I didn't hide things as hard as the text required. In the cellar, had the players searched it all, I would give them the secret door going to the caves. I wanted them to play through the entire adventure, not fail one check and it be over. The potion of neutralized poison hidden behind 2 secret door checks in the drawer, that's too much. Just one will do. It's not something the players were specifically looking for, they're not super motivated to find it, and it's low value. I didn't see the point in hiding it so hard. Fourth, I didn't put the hidden trap door to the basement right next to an entrance the players are likely to find right off the bat. I did make them explore some. U1 Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh is available on DriveThruRPG, new in PDF or print on demand. Sadly, we run into the problem of damaging Wizards of the Coast's virtues by letting them profit off the work of incurable racists and women haters if we buy there. So maybe we would all be better off buying this from eBay or resellers. Maybe it's archived on the internet somewhere. You can get it for free and without downloading a virus with it. While this module has been widely reviewed, they're almost universally positive and so disagree with my take. To provide a more balanced assessment, 2 reviews I recommend are Talking TSR's review of the module by 2 longtime professional game designers and Seth Skorkowski's old review, which is a little more balanced than the others I've seen. And there you have it. If you enjoyed this review, do remember to like and subscribe, maybe share this around to other people. So hit them buttons. Have you ever played, ran, or read The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh? If so, I'd like to hear what you thought. So please put those in the comments below. I read them all. Do you have a different perspective? I'd love to hear it. And so, my dear friends, as we part for now, I wish you nothing but the best.